Amanda Monthei. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Excited to chat about this.
Yeah. Um, can you tell people a little bit about who you are?
Totally, yeah. So I'm currently in Missoula. I moved here last summer for the University of Montana MFA, the Creative Writing Program. Going into my second year on Monday of that program and trying to soak up the last bits of Missoula summer in the meantime. I lived in Bellingham, Washington before that. I have been kind of writing and podcasting and I don't know, yapping a lot for the last 10 years or so. A lot of that yapping has been about wildfire. I have a podcast about wildfire called Life with Fire. And a lot of my like writing friends are surprised to find that I'm not writing about fire at all in my MFA program. I am writing about growing up in rural northern Michigan and all of the strange things that entailed. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm working on now. That's my writing project at the moment. Is sort of memoir-esque about my upbringing in northern Michigan and doing a little bit of sort of personal narrative blended with like natural history, blended with family history and some research. It's been really fun. It's been really chaotic and unorganized. And every time I look at my draft of this big project, I get more overwhelmed. So other than that, that's basically what I have going on right now. I did work in fire for a few years. That's kind of where this fire obsession came from. And so yeah, just trying to write as much as I can.
That sounds like a lot of people's creative process, honestly. Like if you were hyper organized, that'd be suspect.
Yeah,
You
kind
sure
of
you're in the
boring,
MFA
right?
program? That's weird. I don't know. Yeah. As you know, this podcast is called My Favorite Things, so we have a list of your five favorite things in chronological order as you experience them. So let's talk about them. Um, this first one is called Booter Crunk by Rage Films. I have zero exposure to this, so can you kind of explain what it is
Yeah,
before we get into how you encountered it?
totally. This is a wild card pick, but it came to mind a couple days ago when I was thinking about just this concept and this episode that this like podcast idea you have. So, wow, that was a weird way of saying that. This the question that you gave me about my
Yeah.
five favorite things, and I was like, what has helped inform kind of like who I am as a person, and like what were some of the early sort of cultural touchstones of my life. And Rage, yeah, this Booter Crunk ski film from Rage Films. I think it was made in 2005. And I can talk more about how I encountered it at first, but yeah, it's just this. It's like kind of a classic mid 2000s ski film, and it's just kind of off the wall. There were so many songs in that film that I will hear kind of randomly now, and it'll like give me just this insane dopamine hit because I just watched this film so much when I was in like my early high school years. It was like my first sort of exposure to like ski culture because I had never watched a ski film before that. So yeah, so that's a little bit of the background on that. Like I haven't watched it in probably 10 years, if not more. So I can't like explain exactly like my memory of it is pretty like fairly limited, but I just remember it was like this profound like moment of realizing like that I kind of wanted to be embedded in ski culture too. I was like really obsessed with like park skiing at the time, and I just that film kind of like opened up the world a little bit for me as a ninth grader in Michigan. Um, and yeah, I feel like it kind of set off this series of wanting to work in the ski industry. I was obsessed with the idea of becoming like a ski journalist until fully like halfway through college, because of like sort of like I think this just set off that sort of domino effect of like, oh, this is something, this is like a world that I'm really interested in, and like skiing isn't just kind of like these tiny hills in Michigan, and like there's an opportunity for this. Yeah, I don't know, there's like just an opportunity, there's so much more out there, I guess. And in 2005 in Michigan, I guess Booter Crunk by Rage Films was like my mechanism of finding that out.
So where are you skiing in 2005 in northern Michigan? What's the name of the mountain?
Nub's Knob, my home
No.
mountain in Harbor Springs, Michigan. I love that place. I was spending like in ninth grade, I didn't have my license yet, obviously, but I was just getting rides with friends and like having my parents take me there on the weekends, and was really grateful that there was like I think a lot about, I had a pass thankfully, but I also remember like starting to ski in northern Michigan, and I was so grateful that there were like opportunities to go out with ski club early on. Like in elementary and middle school, we had a ski club that would go out every Thursday, and it was like everyone would go because it was fairly inexpensive, and you'd get like a lesson and a free rental and some food at the cafeteria. And I just yeah, I think a lot about that early period of learning how to ski and going skiing with my friends, and that developing into yeah, just like being kind of obsessed with it when I was in high school, and that sort of informed a lot of my decisions in college, and like wanting to move out west was sort of informed initially by by skiing, because I just that was kind of my access point.
Mm.
Yeah.
Do you recall, did Booter Crunk come into your life via like a DVD copy that somebody gave you, or how did it
Yeah.
how did we
This
get
was
there?
Yeah, I went to Breckenridge with my ninth grade boyfriend, who I think more importantly, I went with his sister, who I was best friends with, and I just happened to be dating him at the time. He was like my first sort of boyfriend in ninth grade. That's kind of crazy. That my parents let me get in a car with his entire family, and we filled like an expedition. I think like their parents, like three rows of seating. We had two friends with us. There was me and then him and his sister and then his parents, and we like drove all the way to Colorado from the Midwest. And it was my first time really like, anywhere west of the Mississippi. And we were like at this, they just like kind of let us loose in Breckenridge, and we were able to do whatever we wanted. And we were like at these ski shops, like looking at the twin tips at these ski shops, the twin tip rentals. We were like, whoa, you guys have rental twin tips here? That's crazy. In the Midwest, that's not something that was happening. And I just remember going to ski shops, and that was like that was for some reason the film that called out to me was Booter Crunk.
So you bought it?
So I bought it. Bought it with my, I don't know, my chore money, I guess.
Yeah. Did Breckenridge feel big compared to Nub's Knob at all?
Yeah, it was pretty wild. I remember like I had to sit middle. I was in the middle row in the middle seat between my boyfriend and his friend, and like all I could see was like when we were driving up the canyon to Breckenridge. It was my first time seeing mountains, and I was like desperate to like look out the windows, but I like couldn't really lean over to see them, so I was like leaning forward and looking out the front window, and just being like blown away by mountains for the first time. Like I'll never forget driving up, I guess whatever that highway is, but yeah, driving
I-70,
up, yeah, exactly, up to Breckenridge, and just being like, oh my God, this is crazy.
Yeah, you're in it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you have, you guys watching this DVD while you're there skiing?
No, I don't think we watched it. We did have a TV set up in the back. It was like a tiny little TV with a VHS like thing. And then we also had video games set up, and I never played the video games, so I was just surrounded by other people, by like my boyfriend and his friend playing video games on this tiny little TV. Like thinking back, it's crazy that road trip, like just thinking it's like a fever dream thinking about that road trip now. First time out west. Yeah.
Can you name any of the songs offhand that were in the film?
There's that Banquet. What is it? I forgot who the name or what the name of the artist is. Let me see.
Oh, it's
but
okay.
It's Banquet. Block Party Banquet.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yep.
I think that I can't remember specifically, but I think that was the song for one of the only female like riders. I think it was actually a snowboarder in the film, and I just remember that scene, and that like that that was like that was an insane. I can't remember exactly like why it was so insane, but I just remember it being explicitly memorable. And then I just progressively picked up more. I got picked up more and more ski films throughout my high school years. And then like Shane McConkey and like, Cody Townsend. And there were a number of other like films and segments that I remember being really kind of infatuated with. But that was the first one, Banquet, and then I think one of the LCD Sound System songs. I can't remember which one, but every now and then they'll pop up on like a 2000s playlist or something, and I'll be like, oh, dang, just like a potent dopamine hit.
Yeah, you have to stop and have your moment
Yeah.
of nostalgia first. And then, okay, all right, now I can go
Couple
on.
deep breaths.
Okay, number 2 is Ernest Hemingway's Nick Adams stories.
Yeah.
Are we out of high school at this point? Or are you reading them? When is this?
That would have been like senior year, I think.
Okay.
Maybe like early college, but I don't know how it was introduced to me. But the book centers around it's sort of like auto fiction almost. It's like yeah, Nick Adams, all of his adventures in Porton Bay, Michigan, which is pretty close to where I grew up, about an hour or so away. And so, he's like saw these short stories and they were just so captivating because they were centered on an ecosystem and a landscape that I was really familiar with. And it was the first time I think I'd ever experienced that, where I was reading something that I could really deeply connect to on a sort of place-based, you know, like I know what that landscape, I know what he's describing because I've like been there, and I've also, maybe not has had as fun of adventures as Nick Adams, but like certainly I could just like put myself into these scenarios because I was familiar with the places that he was talking about. So I think that was just the reason that one was so profound. I think was because it was the first time I'd really like seen myself in literature and like seen and felt something resonating at like such a like deeply personal level, and yeah, kind of really informed, like to this day, sort of I think informs what I'm hoping to do with my like with like a memoir, with like the essays that I'm writing about Michigan, just to like just remembering that even if something feels like deeply specific and deeply personal, in fact, like if you can expand it out, if you can talk about, the ecosystem, the natural spaces that you're in, like people will be able to resonate with that. Maybe even if they're not familiar, hopefully, even if they're not familiar with those places, but even more so if they are. So yeah, that was just something I think, yeah, early on I don't feel like I read, I didn't read enough in middle and high school. I feel like I like, it wasn't really modeled to me. It wasn't something I was really like focused on. I feel like some of my teachers were encouraging, like, encouraged us to read. And obviously we had to read for some of our classes, but like, I feel like I was not reading in my free time that much. And I think it was because I wasn't finding anything that I was really engaged in and like excited about. And I think that was the first book that I just like ate up. I read it so fast and I was like, I want more like this. And so I think I read, yeah, like, The Big Two Hearted after that. I think that was actually part of the book. I think it was like a collection of short stories that included The Big Two Hearted. But yeah, that was a
Was
kind of a
it was
turning
it
point in just like enjoying myself while I'm reading.
was it this one? In Our Time?
No, it was, it
Okay.
was actually called the Nick Adams stories.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So the
Yeah.
full collection. Okay,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Were you in high school, were you like having the feeling I want to get out of Michigan? Or
Yeah.
was it, okay. So was there something about Hemingway kind of celebrating that area of the country that made you feel like, I don't know, how did it make you feel?
I think, yeah, I, I knew like, I think that was why the ski films were so powerful, was that it was like introducing me to these other places in a way that I hadn't experienced before. So I was like, oh, I can't wait to get out west. I can't wait to be able to ski out west. And that kind of progressed, that sustained through college. But I do think reading that book, it was like it gave me a deep sense of pride in like where I was from, and I think that I've carried that even though I've moved out west since. I think I've carried that pride um, in a way that I'm like, I actually like I don't know if I would have understood, or I don't know that I would have um, if it would have been this profound if I hadn't read that book. I think like especially like a literary pride. Like I think it introduced me to the idea that like there is a pretty like strong sort of canon from this area, and there are a lot of folks who were inspired, who did really exceptional work while living in this area. I mean, like Jim Harrison, Tom McGuane, Ernest Hemingway, and I think just being introduced to like the first of those, I've eventually I've since sort of like read the others, but just being introduced to the idea that like somebody has written about this place and about this ecosystem and about the types of things people do here. Yeah, I guess that was pretty profound in terms of just making me feel that sense of pride about Michigan.
Yeah, I was just having coffee with an old professor of mine from the university here this week, and the Nick Adams stories came up. I can't remember if he's teaching them maybe in a course as part of a course, but he was saying there's a guy in Michigan that claims to be able to take, like, he knows exactly, he's figured out which river is Big Two-Hearted River, and
Yeah.
will take you there. I'm not sure how correct that is, but
Yeah.
do you have an idea?
Yeah, I'm familiar with this. So like, yeah, the Fox River is like what the Big Two-Hearted was about.
Okay.
And the Fox River is like, I don't know much about the Fox other than that I've driven over it many times to go to college in the UP. And whenever you like driving over it, you can sense just like how miserable it would be to fish this river. It's just so swampy, so overgrown. You look down it and you're like, you wouldn't even want to bring a fly rod in there. It would be a gong show. And so like, yeah, I have to imagine that was kind of a miserable experience. But yes, I've heard about, and maybe it's different when it's off the highway. Maybe there's some sections that are a little more forgiving that you can't see from the highway and scenic. But yeah, I think it's it's just like it's cool that it has that sort of literary history in that area, and it was cool to find that out is like when I was feeling like this deep sense of like I don't belong here, like I want to leave, and so yeah, having that book sort of change my perspective on it at that sort of formative age was important.
Yeah. Do you think the Hemingway voice influences your writing at all nowadays?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I wonder about this. I wonder like where I read a lot of like very weird, like I read a lot of Chuck Klosterman when I was in high school. I don't really know how or why I found Chuck Klosterman in high school. Like Sex, Drugs, and Cocoa Puffs. I was like obsessed with like that style of writing in like 11th grade. Again, at this time, I'm like, I wish somebody when I was like a little sponge who was like just seeking out anything in terms of reading, in terms of like books that resonated with me. I wish somebody had been there to like sort of guide me because what I was finding was like not to say Chuck Klosterman's bad, but like I just feel like actually I informed my voice. Like I feel like my voice was formed quite a bit by reading books like that when I was in high school, like kind of cultural criticism, like sarcastic or like I don't even know, like that tone of
Hmm.
writing really did inform my early voice, and I think still like has some influence, which is so strange to think about.
I read a bunch of Chuck Klosterman, like Fargo, Rock City,
Hmm.
Killing Yourself to Live. There's a lot of stuff in there that still comes up in my memories
Yeah, totally.
from time to time. So I don't know. I wouldn't
It's
shit
not a
on Chuck
bad thing.
Klosterman. Yeah. No.
No, and I don't. I think it was like so fun to read when I was that age. And in fact, I've read. Trying to think of the book that I read recently of his, but I like kind of love that is what has informed my voice. I feel like of all things I could have found my way into, I'm really grateful it was that. It's just like when I think back on how random that is in the grand scheme of like being in the Midwest and like not being interested in cultural criticism or not even knowing what that is at that time and like finding my way into these books of essays, like so strange,
Yeah.
so random.
Yeah, I don't know how I found out about it either. I found out about his stuff. I mean, I was reading like Spin magazine and stuff at the time, but I feel like somebody recommended the book Fargo
Hmm.
Rock City to me, which is a great title, you know.
Hmm. Totally.
Yeah, but yeah. Okay, moving up about 100 years or 80 years. We have the writing of John Jeremiah Sullivan, who is a longtime journalist for I think now like New York Times Magazine, but written for all the fancy publications and you specifically listed a couple stories here. Do you want to talk about do you want to talk about the first one, or do you want to talk about his in general? Whatever you want to, however you want to take this.
Yeah, totally. I was like introduced to John Jeremiah Sullivan in college by like hands down my favorite professor um, of my undergrad, Josh McIver Anderson. Shout out. He was my nonfiction professor for a couple years, and he had us read Pulphead for one of his nonfiction classes. And I remember just like reframing my entire concept of like what nonfiction could be, and like has stuck with me. And I obsessively am like always Googling John Jeremiah Sullivan to see like if he has released new stuff, because he's sort of under the radar now. Like he doesn't
Hmm.
release new things very often. And so I'm kind of always keeping tabs because I just have loved almost everything that he's put out since then. Like he did a piece about this plumber that came to his house. I think it was for Harper's, and it was just like hilarious. I feel like I read a piece about his from like a trip to Disney World that he took, and a lot of it feels a little like David Foster Wallace esque, where you're like combining personal narrative with like research and then just like being part of the story yourself, like being it's like very very personal, very sort of observational. So that's what I loved about like Upon This Rock, which is one of the pieces I shared. Like I first read that again in like 2012 probably, and it just completely re again reframed how I was thinking about nonfiction and what nonfiction could be. And it's hilarious, it's deeply engaging, it's like it just like it's very humanizing, it's very like empathetic. I just like really appreciated how he braided all these things together and had like the tone of his writing, his ability to sort of like, I don't know, just be a part of the story, and kind of embed in what he's doing. The Ballad of Gishi and Elvi is another one that I thought was just a really good example. It's like more journalistic, I would say, yeah, definitely more journalistic than Upon This Rock, but it's very like he's almost kind of rewriting history as he's writing this piece. Like he's like part historian. He's like part of the research process, part of like developing what the history of these two women, these two like women who sort of reshaped early blues music in Wisconsin in like the early 1930s. Like he's the one that's doing the research, and like it's or you know, he has a team of researchers, but he's like kind of like shaping this story, and a lot of it is speculative. I think he does a really good job with like speculative nonfiction where he's like, maybe they did this, like maybe this is what this would have looked like when they were riding on the train into, you know, Milwaukee or whatever. Like this is what they would have been seeing. They would have been
Hmm.
seeing this flooding that like occurred that spring. They would have experienced, this is what the lake would have looked like at the time that they arrived. Like stuff that it's just like kind of exceptional how expansive nonfiction can be. And I think he's just really extraordinary at like expanding those boundaries. So yeah, that's my ode to John Jeremiah Sullivan. I also just think he's hilarious, and I love like the way he interprets and like interacts with the world, and you can see that in his writing, and I think that's really special. He's not afraid to sort of embed himself.
Yeah, I was just this morning, reading the beginning of Upon This Rock, trying to remember it from the book that I'd read 10 years ago or whatever. And he likes, it's about Christian rock festivals. And he goes on, this is like 2004, he goes on like an internet message board to try to,
Yes.
it's like, what'd be great is if I could get some of these young people to ride to this music festival with me over several days, and we'll go there. I'll just kind of embed myself with them. And he talks about how he's just like completely underestimated how young the fans are on this message board, and they all think he's a pedophile because he's like, I was thinking like, people up to the age of 28 would be good, and it turns out these people are like 12 and
Yes.
14, and they're
And they
like, I
all
don't
like,
think my mom would think that was very like cool, but I would go. And he's just like, oh my god, what am I doing?
and they all like gang up on him in the chat room. Like
Yep.
it just like it just escalates, and he's like, "Oh my god!" And yeah, and then he's like, "I got to change my whole program now. Like I can't go to that
Yes.
one anymore."
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
It's so
So
fun.
where are you going to school, and what are you studying when this comes up in your nonfiction class? Like, what's your major at that point?
Yeah, I was at Northern Michigan University in Marquette, Michigan, and I was doing, I think, yeah, it was an English writing degree with a creative nonfiction focus, with I think a journalism minor. So from early on in my like, well, I mean, I made it to an English writing degree by way of international studies, photography. I think I tried history for like a semester. And then I eventually made my way into writing because I had been a writer. I had worked I'd like done a bunch of stuff for our high school yearbook and our high school newspaper, which I think it's exceptional that my rural high school in northern Michigan had a journalism program that was like not only like really strong, but also was like award winning at the national level. We would go to these national awards and get like best of show or like, you know, best photography or whatever it was.
Mm.
And so I'd been writing for that class, and it sort of helped frame up where I wanted to go when I was in college and trying to decide what I was doing. And yeah, I ended up in English writing, and yeah, graduated in 2013. So it's been like 12 years between undergrad and my MFA, which proved to be pretty intense. But yeah, that's the backstory on that.
Yeah. And so in those intervening years, how do you think this work actually informed what you were doing with yourself between graduation and entering the MFA program? Or actually, did it lead you to the MFA program?
I think it did lead me, because I think that I was I'm still like trying to do this style of work, like ideally. But I struggle with, I was finding that I was struggling with long form writing, longer form, you know, like a lot of the essays that I write are like under 2,000 words, like before I got into the program. I was doing like almost what you would call like flash nonfiction, like short little essays, some reportage, some attempts at braiding reportage with like personal narrative and like being embedded in the story. I like have a few stories I'm really proud of that I did kind of pull that off, but I have so many more ideas. You know, I think like, I don't know. I think like my dream coming out of college was like, I'm just gonna go do John Jeremiah Sullivan stuff. I'm just gonna go do David Foster Wallace stuff. I'm gonna go to these weird festivals, or like, I don't know, NASCAR races, and like just like observe people and talk to people and like write great magazine pieces about these like obscure Americana festivals and events. And like I think that's still weirdly there. It's like it's buried. But I think I just like I wasn't really doing that. I wasn't doing the style of writing that I thought would be like the most fun, because I think the style of writing I want to do requires, you know, like some longer form and just like more involved work. Like I'm trying to learn how to just stick with ideas until you know, until I reach a point where I feel happy with the product. You know, like I think even Sullivan talks about spending like a year on a story, and he hyperfixates, and he just like locks in, and like this is what he's thinking about and focusing on. And I'm kind of interested in that, in like getting to a place where I can do that. I think the problem will be also making money, but
I was going to say, there's like, you can't compare yourself to people like when they were in the golden age of print journalism, you know,
it's
like,
so true. Yeah.
And I would say he was probably, it was trending out of that, but like there were people who write for like the New Yorker, and they deserve this, but they just write like 6 stories a year, and they get like pretty close to 6 figures, I'm pretty sure. So it's like, when you're like, I spent a year on this, you're like, well, how much money were you making? And like, nowadays it's really hard to get paid for something that you're like, I want to go to this music festival, and they're like, okay, cool, we'll give you $500, and you're like, well, okay.
Yeah, they'd never get you the 28-foot RV, that's for sure.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I know. So,
always a tough balance though. Yeah, because like I can subsidize some of that work a little bit with like other work on the side, communication stuff, but you just end up tapping so much of your limited creative capacity. I can't even imagine living in a world in which you could just focus on writing all the time.
Advice I was not able to follow from my Uncle Danny was, you can marry more money in a minute than you can make in a lifetime. And I do think, not that we should be like putting people under a microscope, but sometimes when you're like, how does this successful writer do it? If you have that one key piece of information where you're like, oh, well, their partner has a real job with health insurance, like, oh, well, that would make it a lot easier, you know? So it's like, But we're not in that camp at our house, so
No.
it's a little bit more scrappy.
Yeah.
So yeah, but anyway, that's just a joke. I don't think it's a good
No, I love that.
strategy.
I've been, kind of, I've been attempting to explore that strategy. It's a tough one.
Right, right. Yeah,
Turns
I
out I'm
know.
actually just like only dating like commercial fishermen and like seasonal workers, which is
Is
not
this
the
true? Is this all
pathway.
through the same app? I mean,
I wish.
uh, okay. Number four, Year of Magical Thinking by Joan Didion. This is a famous book, but for people who have not read it, can you kind of describe what happens in the book?
Well, it's the year after her husband dies. And I read this book the year that my stepmom died, which was it was absolutely the most like profound grief I'd ever experienced. And that was 2014. And so my stepmom passed away. I was living at home. This was after college. This was again the time when I was like desperate to move out west and
Mm.
kind of was thrust into this situation where I was like helping out at home. I have four young half sisters. Three of them were my are my dad and my stepmom's daughters, and so I was like just in the thick of it, kind of like doing a lot of like caretaking and like dealing with grief of my own while also like kind of managing the grief of my sisters and my dad. I'm writing about this right now, so it's like front of mind. Um,
Yeah.
and I just remember reading that book and being like again, kind of similar to the Nick Adams stories, just being like, whoa, somebody has written about an experience that I'm having and it actually reflects in some ways my own experience and like it makes me feel less alone. And I think that's like the whole thing with writing and reading is just like wanting to feel less alone in these moments where you're like, this is so much. And so it was so much. And so reading her book and like reading about her grief and how she was managing it and how she was thinking about it and processing it. Um, and I think, I read a few reviews of it this morning, this morning, just in preparation. And people were calling it like, really cold. Like she was not very emotional in her like relay and in her processing of her grief. I can't remember that part of the book. Like I don't remember the tone being cold, but I remember it being deeply resonant. I remember it being like, and maybe that's a reflection of how I grieve too, but I just it was it was it was just the first book that I read where I was like, "Oh, this is deeply emotionally resonant in a way that I didn't even know was possible." And I think it was maybe the first time that I realized that like I could write stuff like that like the grief I was experiencing could also be that for somebody else. And I think that's just a formative thought to have and really empowering to feel that way when you're reading a book that like as a writer where you're and a burgeoning writer, like a young like baby writer, I was like, I have unique experiences of grief that I think could be useful to write about. And I did write about it. And it was like it was the only thing I was writing about for like 5 years of my life because it was so much to process. And like those essays that I wrote and posted on my like website, and had people who I didn't know, like friends of friends, because I would just post it on like Facebook, but I'd have like friends of friends be like, this was such a like this was the way that you've explained grief like really resonates with how I experience grief, or like I really appreciated this. Like this is also how I felt in the after my stepmom passed away. Like people who were really close to us. So that I think really resonate or it really built just like having read that book and then having like felt empowered to write about my own grief and then having people respond to that by saying things like this resonated or like you've captured something that I've felt too was like in that early period of being a writer felt so powerful and felt so like, energizing. And I was like, this is all I want to do now. I just want to like write about these like hyper nuanced experiences that are like hyper specific experiences that like actually are still going to resonate with people. And bringing these bringing these vulnerabilities and like the emotions that I've experienced like to the page and just seeing what happens. And like sometimes it falls flat and sometimes it doesn't. And I just like I think that all started with that book.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. I think that's like kind of when I teach writing workshops, they talk about like, that's what we're trying to do is just find the collection of words to describe something so that it can make people feel less alone, when they read it, so they can say me too, and because people say like, oh, I'm just another person with this who's done the same thing as other people. Should I even write about it? I'm like, of course. Like, what you think we need more love songs? Like there's gonna be more love songs this year. Like people just keep making them, and we keep embracing them. So yeah, your story matters too. And she also was like her daughter was in
And
a
it,
coma
yeah,
when when her husband died or the dad died, and then also her daughter died. I think before the book came out. Is
yeah, I
that?
think so. It was like a pretty back-to-back battering. I couldn't remember the exact specifics, but I was like, I think her daughter was also, yeah, a big part of the book.
Yeah, yeah. That's rough. Did somebody give it to you or recommend it because they knew what you were going through, or were you? Do you remember how you encountered it?
I don't remember at all, which is weird. I think I had read Joan Didion in college. I'd read like Slouching Towards Bethlehem, maybe the Blue Album, and some of her other essays. And so I think I was like probably Googling books, like books of essays about grief or something to that effect. Because I think I also stumbled on, I can't remember when this was published. It might have been quite a few years later, but a book there was David Sedaris wrote a book about grieving as well. And I remember like really liking that book as well. And so I don't know how I was finding these other than maybe that I was actively like seeking them out.
Mhm.
I don't know that people were recommending them to me because I lived in, yeah, Indian River, Michigan, like not a literary place. Not a lot of there's not a community there for that, like that I've found anyway. And maybe it's changed since then, but at the time I feel like I was like really I felt yeah, I felt really isolated in that experience and
Mhm.
in like not having the resources to really know how to process it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Shout out to Joan Didion for that.
Yeah, thanks, Joan.
The master of
Oh, yeah.
writing many things, let alone like grief. We have the same Le Creuset pan. I realized because somebody did some story about
Oh,
or
fun.
cooking pot, and I was like, oh, that's the one thing I have in common with Joan Didion.
Great.
Because
You gotta have one.
apparently she threw these like amazing, I think Thanksgiving dinners, and there's actually like documentation of like her process of doing this. I'll try to find it and send it to you. But I encountered it a few last year because a friend is like going through a Joan Didion phase too for some reason right now.
It's a canon event. Everyone's got it. And there's a Joan Didion documentary that I watched a few years ago. Um,
Oh, is it good?
and it was really good. I
I'll
think I
look it
watched
up.
it
That's
during
fine.
COVID or something, and it was just like
Okay.
exactly what I needed. John's
Yeah.
just been there for me in all of the all of the moments.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. The center will not hold. Yeah, there
Okay.
it is.
All right. I'm gonna look that up. I'll put that in the show notes as well. Um, okay. Number 5, King Gizzard live on KEXP. And then you put in this song specifically, and I'll link to the song. Yeah, when are you? I think this is 9 years old, as it says. So it was like put up in 2017. What's going on in your life where you found this video, or did you actually hear it on the radio
I
from
didn't hear it on
Kate?
the radio. I don't think I found it until like 2021, but
Okay.
it's become, I don't know that I have anything super profound to say about this one other than that it's become my like hyperfixation song that like when I turn this on, when I hear the opening beats, like my brain just is like writing mode. And it's only whatever 5.5 minutes long or something. I wish it was like 48 minutes of them just doing like this song over and over and over again without any YouTube ads intermixing in there. But I just get into a mode with this song. And I saw a few weeks ago, I think this might be a fake thing on the internet. I don't know. But like Stephen King, it was like a thing about Stephen King listening to Mambo Number Five a bunch to get into the writing mood and how it was like so annoying to his wife that she was like threatening divorce.
Wow, I would
And
murder him.
I
Oh my
know.
god.
But I read that and I was like, oh my God, Billabong Valley by King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard on KEXP in 2017 is my Mambo number 5.
I feel like I want it. Well, and I do this too. And I just did the exact same thing to my wife like 5 days ago. Like one weekend, I was like, yeah, I'm just working on this thing. And she was sitting across from me at the kitchen table. This is after Jay went to bed. And I'm not going to say the song, but like I finally shut it off after, because I was just hammering. I'm like, yeah, okay. And she had headphones on. She just goes, finally. Oh my God. And it was like a repetitive instrumental. And yeah, anyway, but it's a tactic for sure. And
in there.
I don't know if this is a YouTube premium feature, but if you just like right click or double click on the video, there's a thing where you can loop the song. But I have YouTube premium, so that might be why. So there's no ads, but
yeah. I'm kind of wondering if that would like put me into psychosis or something because I think I would just get lost in it. Like I would just like not even realize what was happening, and it would be like 5 hours later, and I'd be like, "What happened? What did I just experience?"
Yeah, well, that might be very productive too, right? Like we finish a book in that amount of time. Mm-hmm. So this band, did you know about them before you found this KEXP set?
Yeah, I think I was like looking them up on YouTube, and that was one of the first things that came up, and yeah. And it's just this specific recording of this song. Like if I listen to that song on Spotify, it doesn't hit nearly as well as the recording that we'll link to. But I don't know. I don't have like any specific crazy things to say about King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard other than I've seen them live once. It was a great show. I love their like the breadth of the work that they do. Like I love that like each of their albums is so wildly different. I love that they're like experimental. I think this was a microtonal album. Don't ask me what that means, but like I feel like it gave it this great, I don't know, this great vibe. It felt very like almost like kind of Middle Eastern or something. Like you can tell there are so many layers of influence in all of their different albums. Like I'm not a huge, I don't know, is there like a deadhead term for King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard people? There probably is, but like I'm not that person. I just like love their live recordings specifically of like this album.
Yeah. I guess we should maybe dive in and talk about what KEXP is and what like live KEXP is. As a person who lived in Bellingham for a long time, could you describe KEXP? I feel like it's like such a unique radio station.
I wish I could. I feel like there is like this enormous like it has like a really enormous cultural place in like Seattle specifically. It's the NPR station. They do some like I can't remember the name of the woman who's in the studio. Why can't I think of her name? But I feel like I love her voice. Like she's just like such a calming voice. The shows that they bring on, the artists that they bring on, like I will discover an artist and I'll put them, I'll look them up on YouTube, and like KEXP will have done a recording with them like 8 years ago, and I'm like, damn, they're on it. So I don't know like a lot beyond that, other than that, again, every time I find a new artist, they've already found them like 5 years ago, 8 years ago.
There's a band, I'm blanking on the name of it right now, but they like thank Cheryl and KEXP. I think it's Cheryl. Is that what you're saying? Cheryl Waters. They thank Cheryl at the beginning of their show for like basically making their career. I think it's Nation of Language. Is that the name of the band? Yeah. But they, it's a phenomenon. Like they've been to the building in Seattle where they redid the building. So they would have this huge performance space and a coffee shop and a record store, and people just go there and hang out. Like when you're like, oh, radio stations are struggling, they're all being bought up by like Clear Channel or whatever, and KEXP is just thriving. Like it's unbelievable. And they said, one of the other hosts, I think it was John? I think it's John in the Morning, said during a Jose Gonzalez show that they built the new space because, basically they had no even green room for the artists to come in to like hang out before, and Jose Gonzalez was like sleeping in his car or sitting in his car waiting to do this show, because typically what they do is the artist will be playing a show that night somewhere in Seattle or the next day, and they'll do a few songs in the studio, and it has turned into this just incredible thing, that you can find so many incredible musicians on it. I got to be in the room, not whatever it's called, like the control room or something, when Andrew Bird was there.
Sweet.
Because a friend had a meeting there, and she's like, "Do you want to go to KEXP?" And I'm like, "Yeah, for sure." And she's like, "Oh, yeah, Andrew Bird's here." And like, amazing, like, yeah. And I was so blown away because I'm a huge Andrew Bird fan. And then they gave us some tickets to the show that night, which was awesome.
I
Yeah,
didn't,
I know.
that's a story. That's great. Dang.
Yeah, yeah, but yeah, no, I have a thing. The banter back and forth with some of the musicians and
Mhm.
Cheryl, like Ben Gibbard specifically, is like homies with her, and like they chat.
Yeah, I
Which
love
is really
that.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, the chatting has actually become part of like the hyperfix, the hyper, whatever you'd call it on these recordings. Like, because at this point I just have like a playlist. It just plays all of the recordings back to back, basically. And at this point, like, yeah, Cheryl Waters, her questions and their responses to them, I'm like, it's like part of the music at this point. It's just like kind of the whole program. So yeah, I wish I had more to say about that one, but yeah, it's just been thing I'm obsessing over. Like when I need to like lock in, it's like that's the first thing I do.
Do you ever think like maybe in 10 years you're gonna look back and be like, you're gonna hear this song and be like, oh my god, this was grad school. This is
I
my
think
grad school writing song.
that
Yeah.
yeah. I kind of love when that happens when you forget about a song and how obsessed you were with it for a year and then you hear it again and it's just such a potent like I don't even know dopamine experience
Yep.
to hear a
Literally takes
song
you
that
back.
is so attached to a specific era of your life and be like, how did I forget about this for the last 10 years?
Yeah. The massive nostalgia trigger.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Um, awesome. This was fantastic. So we have for your favorite things were Booter Crunk, Hemingway's Nick Adams stories. I love the juxtaposition of those two right there.
A sentence that's never been said before.
Booter Crunk and Hemingway. So Booter Crunk, Hemingway's Nick Adams stories, the writing of John Jeremiah Sullivan, which I will link to Pulphead in the show notes, which is the collection of a bunch of these stories. Joan Didion's Year of Magical Thinking, and King Gizzard live on KEXP. Thanks so much for doing this, Amanda. This has been super fun.
Yeah, that was a great time. Yeah, thanks, Brendan.